The November wind carried dust and secrets through Marfa, Texas, in 1883, and Theresa Fulton knew that both could bury a woman if she let them. She stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but a worn carpetbag, a faded shawl wrapped tight around her middle, and the kind of fear that made your bones feel hollow. The town sprawled before her like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep, all weathered storefronts and hard, packed earth. The kind of place where people asked questions with their eyes before their mouths ever opened. She had been traveling for 3 weeks, leaving behind Charleston and everything that came with it. Her aunt's house, with its suffocating propriety. The whispers that followed her down cobblestone streets. The man who had promised her the world and delivered only shame before disappearing into the night like smoke. Now, at 22 years old, she carried a secret that grew heavier with each passing day, pressing against the cotton of her dress, demanding to be noticed. The hotel keeper was a woman in her 50s with silver threading through her dark hair, and she looked at Theresa with the kind of knowing that made her stomach clench. "Just passing through?" she asked, her voice neither kind nor unkind. "I'm looking for work," Theresa said, keeping her voice steady. "I can cook, clean, so I'm good with numbers too." The woman's eyes flickered down just for a moment, and Theresa's hand instinctively moved to adjust her shawl. "There's a ranch about 5 miles out," the woman said finally. "The Lawson place. Old man died last spring and his son's been trying to keep it running. He might need help with the house. Name's Nathan Lawson." Theresa nodded, filing the information away. She paid for a week in advance, counting out the coins carefully. She had enough money to last maybe 2 months if she was careful, 3 if she was lucky. After that, she would need steady work, and she would need it before her condition became impossible to hide. That night, she lay in the narrow bed and felt the flutter of movement in her belly, still so subtle that she might have imagined it. But she hadn't imagined it. This was real as the calluses on her hands from scrubbing her aunt's floors, as real as the heartbreak that had driven her west. She pressed her palm against the slight curve and whispered into the darkness, "I'll figure this out. I promise." Morning came with pale light filtering through thin curtains. Theresa dressed carefully, choosing her loosest dress and arranging the shawl to drape just so. She studied herself in the small mirror, turning this way and that, 4 months along now. She could hide it for maybe another month, 6 weeks if she was clever. After that, she would need a different plan. She found the general store and bought supplies, a bit of thread, some needles, and a newspaper. The man behind the counter was friendly enough, chattering about the weather and the upcoming Christmas social. "You new in town?" he asked. "Just arrived yesterday," Theresa said, examining a bolt of fabric she couldn't afford. "Well, welcome to Marfa. It's a good town, good people. We look after our own here." Theresa wondered what he would say if he knew the truth about her. Would she still be considered one of their own? Or would the doors close one by one until she had nowhere left to go? She asked for directions to the Lawson Ranch, and the storekeeper drew her a rough map on a piece of brown paper. "Nathan's a good man," he said. "Keeps to himself mostly, but he's fair. Lost his father not long ago, and I think the loneliness is getting to him." The walk to the ranch took most of the morning. Theresa followed the road as it wound through scrubland dotted with mesquite and juniper. The sky was impossibly wide here, nothing like the narrow streets of Charleston hemmed in by buildings and propriety. Here, you could see for miles in every direction, and somehow that made her feel both free and exposed. The Lawson Ranch appeared like a mirage, buildings shimmering in the distance until they resolved into solid wood and stone. The main house was modest but well-maintained, with a wide porch and shutters that had been painted white once upon a time. A barn stood off to one side, and she could see horses in the corral, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. A man emerged from the barn as she approached, and Theresa's breath caught. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of creek water. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, and when he saw her, he stopped, one hand resting on the fence post. "Can I help you?" he called out. Theresa straightened her shoulders and walked closer, very aware of the shawl around her middle, the way the fabric bunched and concealed. "I'm looking for Nathan Lawson. The hotel keeper said he might need help with the house." The man studied her for a long moment, and Theresa felt the weight of his gaze. He was young, maybe 26 or 27, with a face that spoke of long days in the sun and nights spent worrying about things that couldn't be fixed easily. "I'm Nathan Lawson," he said finally. "And you are?" "Theresa Fulton. I'm new to Marfa. I'm a hard worker and I can cook and clean and manage a household. I need the work, Mr. Lawson, and I think you need the help." Nathan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You think so?" "I can see dirty windows from here," Theresa said, surprising herself with her boldness. "And unless I'm mistaken, that's your breakfast plate still sitting on the porch railing." This time he did smile, a real one that softened his features. "You're not wrong. I've been meaning to get someone in to help, but I've been putting it off. Truth is, the house has gone to hell since my father passed. I'm better with horses than housework." "Then we might be able to help each other," Theresa said. Nathan pushed off from the fence and walked toward her, closing the distance. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. He smelled like leather and horses and something else, something clean like soap or fresh hay. "Where are you from, Miss Fulton?" "South Carolina," she said, meeting his eyes. "I came west for a fresh start, running from something." The question was direct, and Theresa appreciated that. She was tired of dancing around the truth, even if she couldn't speak it outright. "Running towards something," she corrected. "A new life." Nathan nodded slowly. "I can understand that. All right, Miss Fulton. Let's see what you can do. I'll pay you $30 a month plus room and board. You'll have your own room in the house and you can take your meals with me. I'm not much for conversation, but I'm not difficult to live with either." $30 a month. It was more than fair, more than generous. Theresa felt something loosen in her chest, just a little bit of the constant tension that had been her companion since she realized she was carrying a child. "That's more than acceptable, Mr. Lawson. Thank you. Call me Nathan," he said. "Mr. Lawson was my father and he's gone now. Only if you call me Theresa." They shook hands, his palm rough and warm against hers, and Theresa felt the strangest sensation, like she had just made a decision that would change everything. She told herself it was just relief, just the knowledge that she had a job and a place to stay, but something whispered that it was more than that. Nathan showed her through the house, and Theresa bit back a sigh at the state of things. It wasn't filthy exactly, but it had the neglected look of a place where a man lived alone and didn't much care about clean curtains or swept floors. Dishes were piled in the kitchen, dust coated every surface, and the bedroom that had belonged to Nathan's father still held all his possessions, frozen in time like a shrine. "I know it's bad," Nathan said, sounding almost embarrassed. "I kept meaning to sort through his things, but every time I start I just get stuck." "Grief is like that," Theresa said softly. "It doesn't follow a schedule." Nathan looked at her sharply, and she saw something in his expression shift. "You've lost someone." It wasn't a question, but Theresa answered anyway. "My mother when I was 16, and my father 2 years later. I understand about getting stuck." They stood in the dusty hallway, two people bound by loss and the complicated business of moving forward. Then Nathan cleared his throat and showed her to her room, a small space with a single bed and a window that looked out over the scrubland. "I'll let you get settled," he said. "I need to ride out and check on the cattle, but I'll be back by supper time. If you need anything, there's supplies in the kitchen." After he left, Theresa sat on the edge of the bed and let herself breathe. She had done it. She had found a place, at least for now. Her hand moved to her belly, to the small swell that would soon become impossible to hide. She had bought herself time, but time was a currency that ran out, and she needed to decide what she would do when it did. But for now, she had work to do. Theresa stood up, adjusted her shawl, and went to tackle the kitchen. By the time Nathan returned that evening, the transformation was remarkable. The kitchen gleamed, dishes washed and put away, the floor swept and mopped. The smell of cooking filled the house, something rich and savory that made Nathan's stomach growl audibly as he stepped through the door. Theresa turned from the stove, a wooden spoon in her hand, and Nathan stopped short. In the warm lamplight, with her cheeks flushed from the heat of cooking, she looked almost ethereal. Her dark hair was pinned up loosely, a few strands escaping to frame her face, and her eyes were the deep brown of good earth. "I hope you like stew," she said. "I found vegetables in the cellar and beef in the cold storage." "It smells incredible," Nathan said honestly. He couldn't remember the last time the house had felt like this, warm and lived in and welcoming. "You didn't have to do all this in one day." "I like to keep busy," Theresa said, turning back to the pot. "Besides, it needed doing." They ate at the kitchen table, and Nathan found himself watching her more than he should. There was something about the way she moved, graceful and careful, like she was always thinking 3 steps ahead. She ate with good appetite, which pleased him somehow, and when she smiled at something he said about one of the horses, he felt his chest tighten. "Tell me about the ranch," Theresa said, breaking the comfortable silence. "How long has it been in your family?" "My father built it 20 years ago," Nathan said. "He came out here with nothing but determination and a good horse, made something from nothing. I was just a boy then, but I remember those early years. They were hard, but they were good too. And now you're running it alone." Nathan nodded. "My mother died when I was young. It was always just me and my father. He taught me everything about ranching, about the land, about being a man. When he died last March, it felt like the ground had been cut out from under me." "What happened to him?" Theresa asked gently. "His heart just gave out." "He was working with a young horse and he collapsed. I got to him fast, but there was nothing I could do. He died in my arms, told me to take care of the place, to build a life here." Nathan's voice roughened with emotion. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing him." Theresa reached across the table and laid her hand on his, a brief touch that sent warmth through his skin. "You're still here. You're still trying. That's not failing." They cleared the dishes together, moving around the kitchen in an easy rhythm that felt strangely natural for 2 people who had just met. When Theresa reached up to put a plate on a high shelf, her shawl slipped, and Nathan caught a glimpse of the curve beneath her dress. She adjusted it quickly, her movements almost panicked, and Nathan pretended not to notice, but his mind was turning. She was hiding something. He had suspected it from the moment she walked up to his ranch, alone and determined with that haunted look in her eyes. Now he was almost certain. Theresa Fulton was with child and she was here alone, which meant there was no husband and probably no support. The realization should have concerned him. A respectable man would send her away, would worry about scandal and gossip. But Nathan found he didn't care about any of that. He thought about his own mother who had died bringing him into the world. He thought about his father's teachings, about honor and kindness, and standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. That night, lying in his bed and staring at the ceiling, Nathan made a decision. Whatever Theresa's story was, whatever circumstances had brought her to his door, he would help her. Not because he expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. The days fell into a pattern. Theresa woke early and prepared breakfast, hearty meals of eggs and bacon and fresh bread that she learned to bake in the old wood stove. Nathan would eat quickly and head out to work the ranch, checking fences and tending cattle and doing the 100 small tasks that kept everything running. Theresa would spend the day cleaning and cooking and slowly bringing order to the house. In the evenings, they would eat together and talk. Nathan told her about the land, about the challenges of ranching in West Texas where water was scarce and the weather could turn on a dime. Theresa told him carefully edited stories about Charleston, about the beautiful old homes and the harbor and the way the air smelled like salt and jasmine in the spring. She never mentioned why she left, and Nathan never asked directly, but the question hung between them like smoke. 3 weeks passed, and Theresa felt the baby growing stronger inside her. The movements were more pronounced now, little kicks and rolls that made her breath catch. She was careful to wear loose dresses and to keep the shawl wrapped around her at all times, but she knew the truth was becoming harder to hide. One afternoon, she was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when a wave of dizziness swept over her. She grabbed the clothesline for support, her vision graying at the edges, and then Nathan was there, his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. "Whoa, easy now," he said, his voice low and concerned. "When's the last time you drank water?" "I'm fine," Theresa protested, but her voice was weak. "You're not fine. Come on, let's get you inside." He guided her to the porch and made her sit in the rocking chair, then brought her a cup of cool water from the pump. Theresa drank gratefully, feeling the world settle back into focus. Nathan crouched in front of her, his eyes searching her face. "You've been working too hard," he said. "You need to rest more." "I can handle the work," Theresa said. "I'm not fragile." "I didn't say you were fragile, but everyone needs rest, especially when they're carrying extra weight." The words hung in the air between them, and Theresa's heart stopped. She looked at Nathan, at his kind eyes and gentle expression, and she saw no judgment there, only concern. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but the words came out wrong, defensive and frightened. Nathan sat back on his heels and sighed. "Theresa, I'm not blind. And I'm not going to ask you questions you don't want to answer. But I need you to know that you're safe here. Whatever brought you to Texas, whatever situation you're in, you're safe at this ranch." Tears pricked at Theresa's eyes, hot and sudden. She had been holding everything in for so long, keeping her secret locked tight behind her ribs, and now this cowboy she had known for less than a month was offering her kindness she didn't deserve. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you. I should have been honest from the start." "You don't owe me your story," Nathan said. "But if you want to tell it, I'll listen." So Theresa told him. She told him about Thomas, the charming young man who had courted her in Charleston. How he had been everything she thought she wanted. Handsome, well-spoken, from a good family. How he had promised her marriage and forever, and all the things young girls dream about. How she had believed him, had trusted him, had given him everything only to discover that his promises were as empty as the wind. "When I told him about the baby, he left," Theresa said, her voice hollow. "Just disappeared in the middle of the night. His family denied knowing anything, said he had gone west to make his fortune. I was left with nothing but shame and a growing belly and an aunt who said I had brought disgrace on the family." "That's not shame," Nathan said fiercely. "That's his cowardice and your aunt's cruelty, but it's not your shame." "The world doesn't see it that way," Theresa said. "I'm a ruined woman, Nathan. No respectable man would want me, and no respectable family would take me in. I came west because I had nowhere else to go, and I've been trying to figure out what I'll do when the baby comes." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon where the sun was starting to sink toward the mountains. Then he looked back at her, and there was something in his expression that made her heart skip. "Marry me," he said. Theresa stared at him. "What? Marry me?" Nathan repeated. "Give the child my name. Let me raise it as my own. No one in Marfa knows you, and no one knows me well enough to count months on their fingers. We'll say you're my wife, that we married back east and came here together. The baby will be legitimate, and you'll be protected." "Nathan, you can't just marry me out of pity," Theresa said, her voice shaking. "That's not fair to you." "It's not pity," Nathan said. "It's practicality and decency and maybe something more. I won't lie to you, Theresa. I don't know if I can offer you love, at least not right away. But I can offer you safety and respect and a home for your child. That has to count for something." "But why?" Theresa asked, tears streaming down her face now. "Why would you do this for me?" Nathan reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Because I know what it's like to be alone. Because my father taught me to help people when I can. And because these past few weeks, this house has felt like a home again. I come in at the end of the day, and there's light in the windows and food on the table and someone to talk to. I don't want to lose that." Theresa looked at him, at this man she barely knew who was offering her everything. She thought about the alternatives, about trying to survive alone with a newborn baby, about the workhouses and asylums where women in her position often ended up. She thought about her child growing up without a name, without a father, branded with her mistakes. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "I want you to know that I'll be a good wife. I'll keep your house and cook your meals and work hard. I won't expect more than you can give." "Then say yes," Nathan said simply. "Yes," Theresa whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were wed 3 days later in a quiet ceremony at the small church in Marfa. The preacher asked no questions, and the hotel keeper and the storekeeper stood as witnesses, both of them beaming like they had orchestrated the whole thing themselves. Theresa wore a simple dress of pale blue, and Nathan wore his best shirt and a string tie that had belonged to his father. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed her cheek gently, a chaste touch that felt like a promise. They walked back to the ranch in the late afternoon light, and Theresa felt the weight of the gold band on her finger, solid and real. "I've been thinking," Nathan said as they approached the house. "We should probably share a room, not for any reason other than appearances. If anyone comes by unexpectedly, it should look like a real marriage." Theresa nodded, her cheeks flushing. "That makes sense." They spent the evening rearranging the house. Nathan moved his things into his father's old room, the larger of the 2 bedrooms, and Theresa brought her few possessions to join them. They set up a screen in one corner to give her privacy for dressing, and Nathan promised to always knock before entering. That first night as a married couple was strange and awkward. They lay in the same bed with a careful distance between them, both staring at the ceiling in the darkness. Theresa was acutely aware of Nathan's presence, the sound of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." "You don't need to keep thanking me," Nathan replied. "We're married now. We take care of each other." As the weeks passed, they settled into their new reality. Nathan was unfailingly kind, treating Theresa with a gentleness that made her chest ache. He insisted she rest more, taking on some of the household chores himself despite her protests. When she couldn't sleep at night, restless with the baby's movement, he would sit up with her and talk about nothing and everything until her eyes grew heavy. December brought cooler weather and preparations for Christmas. The town was planning a social, and several of the neighboring ranch wives came to call on Theresa, welcoming her to the community. She was nervous at first, terrified that they would see through the fiction of her marriage, but Nathan's hand was steady on her back, and his story never wavered. "This is my wife, Theresa," he would say with quiet pride. "We married in Charleston before coming west." One afternoon, Theresa was in town buying flour and sugar when she overheard two women talking by the dry goods. "That Nathan Lawson sure kept his cards close to his chest," one said. "Nobody even knew he was courting anyone, and then suddenly he shows up with a wife." "She seems like a nice girl," the other woman replied, "and you can see he's smitten. The way he looks at her, it's sweet." Theresa's hand went to her belly, hidden beneath her shawl. She was 5 months along now, and the swell was undeniable. But with the loose fit of her dresses and the carefully draped fabric, people seemed to accept the fiction that she was simply a woman with a hearty appetite and a comfortable marriage. At night, the space between her and Nathan in the bed seemed to shrink incrementally. They would talk in low voices about the day, about the ranch, about their hopes for the future. Sometimes, Nathan would reach out and take her hand, holding it loosely as they drifted toward sleep. It was comfort, Theresa told herself, nothing more, but her heart didn't seem to understand the distinction. One evening in mid-December, they were sitting on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. The air was crisp and clean, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the gathering darkness. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said. "Of course." "Do you ever regret it, saying yes to me?" Theresa turned to look at him, surprised. "No, why would you think that?" Nathan shrugged, his eyes on the horizon. "I know this isn't what you probably dreamed about when you thought about marriage. A ranch in the middle of nowhere with a man you barely know. No grand romance, no declarations of love." "I stopped believing in grand romance a long time ago," Theresa said honestly. "What you've given me is better. You've given me security and kindness and a future for my child. That's worth more than any pretty words." "Your child is my child now," Nathan said firmly. "That's what I promised, and I meant it." Theresa felt tears prick at her eyes. "You're a good man, Nathan Lawson, better than I deserve." "You deserve everything," Nathan said, and there was something in his voice, something raw and true that made Theresa's breath catch. They sat in silence as the last light faded from the sky, and Theresa realized with a jolt that what she was feeling wasn't gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, something that wrapped around her heart and squeezed. She was falling in love with her husband, this quiet cowboy who had offered her everything without asking for anything in return. The thought terrified her. She had loved before, had trusted before, and it had ended in betrayal and heartbreak. What if Nathan came to resent her? What if he realized what he had taken on and regretted his kindness? What if he could never see her as anything more than a woman he had rescued out of pity? But when she looked at him, at the strong lines of his profile and the gentle curve of his mouth, she couldn't stop her heart from hoping. Christmas came with a light dusting of snow, rare for Marfa but beautiful nonetheless. Nathan had cut down a small juniper tree and set it up in the parlor, and Theresa decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper stars she had cut from old newspapers. It looked nothing like the elaborate Christmas trees of Charleston, but Theresa thought it was perfect. On Christmas morning, Nathan gave her a gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a beautiful shawl, much nicer than the threadbare one she had been using, woven in shades of cream and soft blue. "I noticed yours was wearing thin," Nathan said, looking almost shy. "I ordered this from a weaver in town. I hope you like it." "It's beautiful," Theresa said, running her fingers over the soft wool. "Thank you." She gave him a shirt she had sewn from fabric she had carefully saved for, working on it in the evenings after he had gone to check on the horses. It fit him perfectly, and when he put it on, His smile was bright enough to light up the whole house. They spent the day quietly, cooking a special meal and sitting by the fire. Nathan put his arm around Theresa's shoulders as they watched the flames dance, and she leaned into him, feeling safe in a way she had never felt before. "I want to tell you something," Nathan said softly. "And I don't want you to feel obligated to respond or say anything you don't mean." Theresa's heart started to pound. "All right. I care about you," Nathan said. "These past months, getting to know you, living with you, I've come to care about you more than I expected. I know our marriage started as a practical arrangement, but I find myself hoping it could become something more, something real." Theresa turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "Nathan, I told you that you don't need to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. I wanted to be honest. I care about you too," Theresa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying not to, trying to protect myself, but I can't help it. You've been so good to me, so kind, and somewhere along the way, I started falling in love with you." Nathan's eyes widened. "Theresa, are you sure? I don't want you to confuse gratitude with love." "I'm not confused," Theresa said firmly. "I know the difference. I'm grateful, yes, but that's not all this is. When you walk through the door at the end of the day, my whole heart lifts. When you smile at me, I feel like I could fly. When you hold my hand at night, I never want to let go. That's not gratitude, Nathan. That's love." Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing over her cheekbones. "I was so afraid you could never see me as anything more than the man who gave you a way out. I was so afraid I would spend the rest of my life loving you from a distance." "You don't have to," Theresa whispered. "I'm right here." He kissed her then, really kissed her, and it was nothing like the chaste touches they had shared before. It was deep and sweet and full of promise, and Theresa felt like she was coming home. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I love you, and I love the child you're carrying. I meant what I said that day on the porch. I'll raise that child as my own, and I'll spend every day of my life making sure both of you know how much you're loved." Theresa was crying now, happy tears that wouldn't stop falling. "I love you too. I love you so much." They held each other as the fire burned low, and for the first time since she had discovered she was pregnant, Theresa felt true peace. She had a husband who loved her, a home that felt safe, and a future that looked bright instead of terrifying. The next months passed in a haze of happiness. Nathan's love for Theresa only deepened as her pregnancy progressed. He was endlessly patient, helping her when the weight of the baby made simple tasks difficult, rubbing her aching back, and talking to her belly with a tenderness that made her weep. "I can't wait to meet you, little one," he would say, his hand spread over the curve of her stomach. "Your mama and I are going to love you so much." The baby, as if recognizing its father's voice, would kick and squirm, and Nathan would laugh with delight. "Strong one, isn't it? Going to be a handful." "Like father, like child," Theresa teased, and Nathan kissed her soundly. In February, Theresa went into labor. It was a long, difficult process, and Nathan held her hand through all of it, his face pale but determined. The doctor came from town, a gruff man who had seen countless births and knew his business. When the baby finally emerged, letting out a lusty cry, the doctor laid the infant on Theresa's chest. "A girl," he announced, "healthy and strong." Theresa looked down at her daughter, at the tiny, perfect face and the shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand beyond what she thought possible. Nathan was beside her, his eyes wet with tears, and when he touched the baby's cheek with one gentle finger, the infant wrapped her tiny hand around it. "She's perfect," Nathan breathed. "Absolutely perfect." They named her Grace, because she was a gift they had never expected and a blessing neither of them deserved. Nathan took to fatherhood like he had been born for it, changing diapers and walking the floor at night when Grace fussed. He sang her silly songs in a voice that was rough but full of love, and he looked at her like she hung the moon and stars. The people of Marfa accepted the Lawson family without question. Grace became a fixture in town, passed from arms to arms at church socials and cooed over by the ranch wives who came to call. No one questioned her parentage, and if anyone counted months on their fingers, they were kind enough not to mention it. One spring afternoon, when Grace was 3 months old, Theresa was sitting on the porch with her daughter in her arms while Nathan worked with a new horse in the corral. Grace was babbling happily, her chubby fists waving in the air, and Theresa felt such contentment that it almost hurt. Nathan finished with the horse and came to sit beside them, his arm going around Theresa's shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am," Theresa said. "A year ago I was alone and terrified and certain my life was over. Now I have you and Grace and a home and a future. It feels like a dream." "It's real," Nathan said, "and it's forever. I know we didn't start out in a conventional way, but what we have now is real and true. I love you, Theresa, and I love our daughter." "Our daughter," Theresa repeated, savoring the words. "I love the sound of that." Grace chose that moment to reach for Nathan, and he took her carefully, holding her against his chest. The baby settled immediately, her little face pressed into his shirt, and Nathan closed his eyes like he was memorizing the moment. "I want more of these," he said suddenly. "More children, I mean, if you want them. I want to fill this house with love and laughter and little voices. I want to build a legacy with you." Theresa felt fresh tears prick at her eyes. "I want that too. I want everything with you." The years that followed were full and rich. Grace grew into a bright, curious child with her mother's dark eyes and her father's quiet strength. When she was 2, Theresa gave birth to a son they named William after Nathan's father. 2 years after that, another daughter arrived, Clara, who had red hair that neither parent could account for but who captured their hearts nonetheless. The ranch prospered under Nathan's careful management. He added more cattle, improved the land, and built a reputation as a fair and honest rancher. Theresa became known for her kindness, always ready to help a neighbor in need, always willing to take in someone who was struggling. One evening, when Grace was 7 and already showing signs of her father's skill with horses, she climbed into Nathan's lap and asked the question that had clearly been bothering her. "Papa, why don't I look like William and Clara?" Theresa froze, her heart in her throat, but Nathan just smoothed his daughter's hair back from her face and smiled. "Because every person is unique," he said. "You look like your mama and maybe some relatives we haven't met, but looking alike isn't what makes a family. Love is what makes a family." "So we're a family because we love each other?" Grace asked. "Exactly," Nathan said. "And I love you more than all the stars in the sky." Grace seemed satisfied with this answer, snuggling against her father's chest. Theresa caught Nathan's eye across the room, and the look they shared was full of understanding and love. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Theresa and Nathan sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were bright overhead and the air smelled like sage and promise. "She's going to ask more questions as she gets older," Theresa said quietly. "Eventually, we'll need to tell her the truth." "I know," Nathan said, "and when that time comes, we'll tell her together. We'll tell her that she was born from love, even if that love didn't last. And we'll tell her that she was chosen and wanted and cherished from the moment I knew about her." "You really see her as yours, don't you?" Theresa asked. "Not just in words, but in your heart." Nathan took her hand and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart. "She's mine in every way that matters. The moment I decided to marry you, she became my daughter. Biology doesn't change that. Love does. Theresa leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the frightened girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Marfa all those years ago, hiding her swelling belly beneath a shawl and desperately hoping for a miracle. She had found so much more than she had ever dreamed possible. The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and small victories. Grace grew into a capable young woman who could ride as well as any cowboy and who had her father's integrity and her mother's compassion. William became a skilled rancher, learning everything Nathan could teach him. Clara surprised everyone by showing a gift for music, and Nathan bought her a piano that he had shipped all the way from San Antonio. When Grace was 15, she came to her parents with questions about her birth. She had overheard something in town, some gossip that didn't quite make sense, and she wanted the truth. Theresa and Nathan sat her down and told her everything, leaving nothing out. Grace listened quietly, her face thoughtful. When they finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at Nathan and said, "So you chose me. You chose to be my father even though you didn't have to." "I've never regretted it for a single moment," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are my daughter, Grace. Nothing changes that." Grace threw her arms around him, and Nathan held her tight while Theresa watched through tears. Whatever challenges they had faced, whatever gossip or judgment might have come their way, they had built something real and lasting. More years passed. William married a smart young woman from a neighboring ranch and brought his bride home to help run the family business. Clara went to school in Austin to study music, returning home for holidays with stories of the city and dreams of performing. Grace stayed on the ranch, working alongside her father and eventually taking over more of the day-to-day operations as Nathan's hair turned silver and his steps slowed. One evening, when Nathan was 60 and Theresa 56, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The house behind them was full of noise and life. William and his wife and their 3 children, Grace and her new husband who had come to work the ranch, Clara home for the summer with her latest compositions. "We did all right, didn't we?" Nathan said, taking Theresa's hand. "We did better than all right," Theresa replied. "We built something beautiful." Nathan pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder as she had done thousands of times before. "I love you," he said. "From that first day when you walked up to my ranch with determination in your eyes and fear in your heart, I think some part of me knew you were going to change my life." "I love you too," Theresa said. "You saved me, Nathan. You saved both of us." "We saved each other," Nathan corrected. "You gave me a reason to make this house a home again. You gave me a family and a purpose and more joy than I ever thought possible." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside, they could hear Grace laughing at something one of the children said, and Clara playing the piano, and William discussing cattle prices with his wife. "You ever think about that day?" Theresa asked. "When I told you the truth about the baby and you asked me to marry you?" "Every day," Nathan said. "It was the best decision I ever made." "You said you would raise that child as your own," Theresa recalled. "And you did. You kept every promise you ever made to me." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "It was never a sacrifice, Theresa. It was a gift. You both were." As the stars began to appear overhead, one by one, Theresa thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. From Charleston to Marfa, from fear to love, from hiding her swelling belly beneath a shawl to raising 3 beautiful children with a man who had proven that family was built on love, not blood. She had come west looking for a new start, and she had found everything. A home, a husband, a family, and a love that had sustained her through every challenge and celebrated every joy. The cowboy who had smiled and said he would raise her child as his own had given her the world, and in return, she had given him her heart. Years later, when Nathan and Theresa were old and their children were grown with families of their own, they would still sit on that porch and watch the sunset. Nathan's hand would find Theresa's, their fingers interlacing with the ease of decades of practice. They would talk about their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the ranch that would stay in the family for generations, about the life they had built from nothing but faith and determination and love. Grace, who had become a formidable ranch owner in her own right, would visit often with her husband and children. She would sit with her parents and tell them stories about the latest calf or the new breeding program she was implementing. And sometimes, when the moment was right, she would thank them again for choosing love over convention, for building a family that was stronger than any obstacle. "I wouldn't be here if you hadn't been brave," Grace would say to her mother. "And I wouldn't be who I am if Papa hadn't been the kind of man who could look past society's judgments and see what really mattered." Theresa would smile and squeeze her daughter's hand. "You would have been somebody wonderful no matter what. That's who you are." "But I got to be wonderful here with you both," Grace would insist. "That makes all the difference." On Nathan's 75th birthday, the family gathered for a celebration that filled the house to bursting. Children ran through the rooms that Nathan had built and Theresa had made into a home. The long table in the dining room groaned under the weight of food prepared by 3 generations of women. And Nathan, sitting at the head of the table with Theresa beside him, looked at the faces of his descendants and felt a pride so profound it brought tears to his eyes. "What are you thinking about?" Theresa asked softly, noticing his expression. "That I'm the luckiest man who ever lived," Nathan said. "All of this, everyone here, it started with one decision: to help someone who needed help, to love someone who needed love, and look what it became." William stood up, raising his glass. "To my parents," he said, "who taught us that family isn't just about blood, it's about showing up every day, it's about keeping promises, it's about love that doesn't count the cost." To Nathan and Theresa, the room echoed, and glasses clinked in a chorus of celebration. That night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was finally quiet, Nathan and Theresa climbed the stairs to their bedroom slowly, their bodies feeling every one of their years. They prepared for bed in the comfortable silence of people who had shared their lives for decades, and when they finally lay down, Nathan pulled Theresa close. "I never told you this," he said into the darkness, "but that day you came to the ranch, I was at my lowest point. I was thinking about selling everything, about giving up. My father's dream felt too big for one man to carry alone." "You never said," Theresa murmured, surprised. "I didn't want to burden you. You had enough to worry about. But seeing you walk up that road, alone and scared but still trying, it reminded me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about moving forward even when you are afraid. You inspired me, Theresa. Before you ever became my wife, before you ever loved me, you inspired me." Theresa turned in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "We inspired each other. That's what partners do." "Partners," Nathan agreed, "for life and beyond." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and if their dreams were full of memories, of hard times overcome and joys shared, well, that was the privilege of a life well lived. The seasons continued their eternal dance. Spring brought new calves and wildflowers carpeting the scrubland. Summer blazed hot and bright, the land baking under an unforgiving sun. Fall arrived with cooler temperatures and the work of preparing for winter. And winter, when it came to West Texas, was brief but beautiful, the rare snow transforming the landscape into something magical. Through it all, the Lawson family endured. They faced droughts that tested Nathan's careful water management. They weathered economic downturns that made every penny count. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, as all families must. But through everything, the foundation Nathan and Theresa had built held strong. Grace, following in her father's footsteps, became known throughout the region as a fair and innovative rancher. She implemented new breeding techniques and conservation practices that other ranchers began to adopt. When people asked her where she learned to be so forward-thinking, she always credited her father. "He taught me that you can honor tradition while still looking toward the future," she would say. "And he taught me that the most important thing you can do is treat people with kindness and respect. Everything else follows from that." William, though he had moved to his own property after marriage, remained closely tied to the family ranch. He and Grace worked together seamlessly, a testament to the values their parents had instilled. And when his own children showed interest in ranching, he taught them the same lessons Nathan had taught him. Clara, though her path took her away from ranching, carried the family legacy in her own way. She became a respected music teacher in Austin, known for taking on students others had given up on. "Everyone deserves a chance," she would tell people who questioned her methods. "My father taught me that. He took a chance on someone when no one else would, and it changed everything." As Nathan and Theresa entered their 80s, their pace slowed but their spirits remained strong. They spent their days on the porch, watching the ranch continue under Grace's capable management, greeting grandchildren and great-grandchildren who would climb into their laps for stories. Theresa would tell tales of Charleston, of the long journey west, of arriving in Marfa with nothing but hope. Nathan would tell stories about the early days of the ranch, about his father's dreams and determination. But their favorite stories were the ones they told together, finishing each other's sentences, filling in details the other had forgotten. "Tell us about when you got married," the youngest great-grandchild would beg, and Nathan and Theresa would exchange a glance full of shared history. "Your great-grandmother showed up at this ranch looking for work," Nathan would begin, "and your great-grandfather gave me a chance when he had every reason not to," Theresa would continue. "I asked her to marry me after knowing her for just a few weeks," Nathan would say. "And I said yes, even though it seemed crazy," Theresa would add. "But it wasn't crazy," they would say together. "It was the sanest thing either of us ever did." The children would sigh happily, loving the romance of the story, not yet old enough to understand the complications that had underlaid it. That would come later, when they were adults and could appreciate the courage it took for both Nathan and Theresa to choose love over fear. On a spring morning when Nathan was 87 and Theresa 83, they sat on the porch watching the sunrise. The sky was painted in shades of lavender and rose, and the air smelled sweet with new growth. Nathan's hand found Theresa's, their fingers interlacing automatically. "It's been a good life," Nathan said softly. "The best life," Theresa agreed. "No regrets. Not a single one." Nathan was quiet for a moment thinking, then he squeezed her hand. "Only that I didn't find you sooner, that we didn't have more years together." "We had enough years to build all of this," Theresa said, gesturing to the ranch, to the house full of sleeping family members. "We had enough years to raise 3 incredible children and watch them raise children of their own. We had enough years to love each other well." "That's more than most people get." "You're right," Nathan said. "As always." Theresa laughed, the sound bright and joyful despite her age. "I'm not always right, but I'm right about this." They sat in companionable silence, watching the day wake up. Grace emerged from the barn, already hard at work despite the early hour. She saw her parents on the porch and waved, a smile lighting up her face. Nathan waved back, pride evident in every line of his body. She's magnificent, he said. They all are, Theresa agreed. We did good work, you and I. The best work, Nathan said. That afternoon, the whole family gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had continued for decades. The table was crowded, 3 generations sitting elbow to elbow, passing dishes and laughing at shared jokes. Nathan and Theresa sat at the head of the table, their usual spots, and watched the organized chaos with deep contentment. William's oldest son, now a young man of 20, stood up with a glass in his hand. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, waiting for the room to quiet. "To Grandpa Nathan and Grandma Theresa. You've shown us all what it means to build a life on love and hard work. You've taught us that family is the most important thing and that kindness is never wasted. We love you both more than words can say." To Nathan and Theresa. The room chorused and Nathan felt his eyes grow damp. "Thank you," he managed to say. "All of you. You're our greatest achievement, our greatest joy. Never forget that." After dinner, as people began to disperse for the evening chores and the long drives home, Grace pulled her parents aside. "I've been thinking," she said, "about adding on to the main house, making a space where you two could have everything on one floor, no stairs to climb. What do you think?" "I think you're a thoughtful daughter," Nathan said. "But your mother and I have been climbing those stairs for over 50 years. We're not going to stop now." "Stubborn," Grace said fondly. "Both of you. It's one of our best qualities," Theresa said with a wink. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in the brilliant colors that only happened in West Texas, Nathan and Theresa resumed their positions on the porch. It was their favorite time of day, when the work was done and the world grew quiet. "Do you remember what you told me that first night after we were married?" Nathan asked. "When we were lying in bed and you thanked me for everything." "You told me I didn't need to keep thanking you," Theresa said, her memory as sharp as ever. "You said we were married and we took care of each other. I want you to know that you've taken care of me just as much as I've taken care of you," Nathan said seriously. "Maybe more. You made this house a home. You gave me children and grandchildren and a reason to wake up every morning with joy in my heart. You've been my partner in every sense of the word." "We took care of each other," Theresa said firmly. "That's what you said, and it's been true every day since." Nathan pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder as naturally as breathing. They had done this thousands of times, this simple act of connection, and it never grew old. Every time felt like a gift. "I love you," Nathan said. "More at the end than at the beginning, if that's possible." "It's possible," Theresa said, "because I feel the same way. I loved you on our wedding day, but I love you infinitely more now. You've earned my love every single day we've been together." They watched the stars emerge one by one until the sky was full of light. Somewhere in the house behind them, someone laughed. A door closed softly. The house settled into its nighttime rhythms, the rhythms of a home full of love and life. "You think people understand?" Theresa asked quietly. "What we did, how we started?" "I think the people who matter understand," Nathan said. "Grace understands. Our other children understand. And the rest of the world, well, their understanding isn't required." "I used to worry so much about what people would think," Theresa admitted. "I was terrified that someone would find out the truth and judge us. And now I know that what we built is stronger than any judgment. We took a situation that the world would have called shameful, and we transformed it into something beautiful. That's not something to hide. That's something to celebrate." Nathan kissed her temple. "You've always been the brave one." "No," Theresa disagreed. "You were brave, I was desperate. There's a difference." "Then we were both brave," Nathan said, "and we were both desperate in our own ways. And we found each other right when we needed to. That's not luck, Theresa. That's fate." They sat until the chill of evening drove them inside, and then Nathan helped Theresa up the stairs, both of them moving slowly but steadily. They prepared for bed with the practiced ease of decades, and when they finally settled under the quilts Theresa had stitched years ago, Nathan pulled her close one more time. "Same time tomorrow," he murmured, already drifting toward sleep. "Same time tomorrow," Theresa agreed. "And the day after that, and the day after that." "For as long as we have," Nathan said. "For as long as we have," Theresa echoed, "which I hope is a good long while yet." It was a good long while. Nathan and Theresa lived to see their 90th birthdays, celebrated with parties that brought people from all over Texas to honor them. They lived to see great-great-grandchildren born, tiny babies with the family's eyes and nose and stubborn determination. They lived to see Grace become one of the most respected ranchers in the state, written about in agricultural journals for her innovative practices. They lived to see William's ranch prosper and grow, eventually merging with the original Lawson property to create an operation that spanned thousands of acres. They lived to see Clara perform at concert halls across the country, her music touching hearts and changing lives. But more than all of that, they lived to see the legacy of love they had created ripple out in ways they never could have imagined. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons Nathan and Theresa had taught. That family was built on love and commitment. That kindness was never wasted. That courage meant choosing to love even when it was hard. On a quiet Tuesday in late September, with the air finally cooling from summer's heat, Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep with Theresa beside him. He was 92 years old, and he left behind a family that mourned him deeply, but celebrated a life well lived. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, a testament to the man Nathan had been and the lives he had touched. Person after person stood up to share stories about his kindness, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to his family and his community. But it was Grace who gave the eulogy that brought everyone to tears. "My father once told me that biology doesn't make a family," she said, her voice strong despite her grief. "Love makes a family." He lived that truth every single day. He chose to love when he could have turned away. He chose to build when he could have torn down. He chose to see possibility where others saw only problems. And because of those choices, all of us are here today. We are his legacy, not just his blood descendants, but everyone whose life was made better by knowing him. She looked at Theresa, sitting in the front row surrounded by her children and grandchildren. "And he chose to love my mother, fully and completely, for more than 60 years. Their love story isn't a conventional one, but it's real and true, and it built something that will last for generations." Theresa sat with tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed to her heart. Grace stepped down from the podium and knelt beside her mother, taking her hand. "He loved you so much," Grace whispered. "He never stopped loving you." "I know," Theresa said, "and I never stopped loving him." Not for one single day. The months after Nathan's death were the hardest of Theresa's life. She had known that losing him would be difficult, but she hadn't understood the depth of loneliness that came with losing your partner of more than 60 years. The house felt too empty, the porch too quiet without his presence beside her, but her family rallied around her. Grace moved back into the main house, insisting that her mother shouldn't be alone. William visited every single day, even when ranch business kept him busy. Clara came home from Austin and stayed for 3 months, filling the house with music that helped heal the raw wound of loss. Slowly, gradually, Theresa found her way forward. She couldn't have the life she'd had with Nathan, but she could honor his memory by continuing to live fully and joyfully. She spent time with her great-grandchildren, teaching them to bake and sew and telling them stories about the man who had been their great-grandfather. And every evening, she would sit on the porch in Nathan's chair and watch the sunset, feeling his presence in the wind and the wide open sky. "I miss you," she would say to the gathering darkness, "but I'm all right. We built something strong, you and I, something that will last." 3 years after Nathan's passing, on a spring morning full of birdsong and sunshine, Theresa died peacefully in her sleep. She was 95 years old, and she left behind a family that stretched across Texas and beyond, united by the love she and Nathan had created. They buried her beside Nathan in the family cemetery on the ranch, under a spreading oak tree. The headstone was simple but perfect: Nathan and Theresa Lawson, partners in life and in love. Their legacy lives on. At the funeral, it was Theresa's turn to be celebrated and remembered. Story after story was shared about her kindness, her strength, her unwavering commitment to family. Her grandchildren spoke about the lessons she had taught them. Her great-grandchildren sang songs she had taught them. And Clara played a piece of music she had composed in her mother's honor, a melody that somehow captured the essence of Theresa's spirit, brave and beautiful and full of grace. After everyone had left and the sun was setting, Grace stood at her parents' grave with her own children and grandchildren around her. She looked at the headstone, at the names carved in stone, and she thought about the incredible journey that had started with a frightened woman hiding her pregnancy beneath a shawl and a lonely cowboy willing to offer kindness to a stranger. "They were extraordinary," she said softly. "Not because they were perfect, but because they chose love over fear again and again. They built this family on that foundation, and that's why we're all still here, still strong." Her oldest grandchild, a boy of 15 with Nathan's eyes, spoke up. "Will you tell us the story again?" "About how they met," Grace smiled, even through her tears. "Your great-grandmother arrived in Marfa in 1883 with nothing but a carpetbag and a secret. She was scared and alone, but she was also brave. She found her way to this ranch and asked your great-grandfather for work. He gave her a job, and then he gave her something more. He gave her his name, his home, and his promise to raise her child as his own. And from that one act of kindness, from that one choice to see past society's judgments and choose love, all of this began." She gestured to the ranch stretching out around them, to the family gathered close. "This is their legacy. We are their legacy. And it's our job now to carry it forward, to remember that love is always stronger than fear, that kindness is never wasted, and that family is built not on blood but on choice and commitment." The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in those brilliant colors that Texas did so well. And as the stars began to emerge, the family stood together at the grave of two people who had transformed a desperate situation into something beautiful, who had proved that love could overcome any obstacle, and who had built a legacy that would last for generations. In the years that followed, the story of Nathan and Theresa became legend in the family. New generations would hear about the cowboy who chose kindness and the woman who found courage, and they would carry those lessons forward into their own lives. The ranch continued to prosper under Grace's descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation Nathan and Theresa had built. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, people swore they could feel the presence of the original Lawsons, still watching over the land they loved and the family they created. Not ghosts exactly, but something more like a blessing, a reminder that love, when it's real and true and built on commitment and kindness, never really ends. It just transforms, passing from generation to generation, growing stronger with each telling of the story. This was the legacy of Nathan and Theresa Lawson. A love story that started with desperation and kindness and grew into something that would last forever. A reminder that the most powerful force in the world is the choice to love, especially when that love is unexpected, undeserved, and utterly transformative. Their story was not just about a cowboy and a woman in trouble. It was about redemption and second chances. It was about seeing past society's rules to what really mattered. It was about building something lasting from nothing but faith and determination and a willingness to take a chance on love. And in the end, that's what made their story special. Not that it was perfect, but that it was real. Not that it was easy, but that they chose it every single day. Not that they never struggled, but that they struggled together and came out stronger on the other side. They had started with nothing but hope and ended with everything that mattered. A family, a home, a love that transcended time and circumstance, and all the obstacles the world had thrown at them. They had proved that sometimes the most conventional beginnings led to the most extraordinary endings, and that sometimes the greatest love stories started with the simplest words. She hid her swelling belly beneath a shawl. The cowboy smiled and said he would raise that child as his own, and from that moment, everything changed. Two lives intersected and created something beautiful. Two people took a chance on each other and built a legacy that would last forever. That was the story. That was the truth. And that was the power of love when it was brave enough and strong enough and true enough to overcome anything.